The ProWrestleMachine is back from excursion with another video. Let's go ahead and dive. May 20th, 1996 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Monday Nitro expanding to 2 hours. Severn vs. Shamrock about to take place. Bash lineup, Rikitos and Memorial lineup. Tons more by Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 95009-1228. May 20th, 1996. World Championship Wrestling announced on May 8th that it was expanding its Monday Nitro show to 2 hours, from 8 p.m. Eastern Time, effective on May 27th. The expansion of the show had been somewhat in the works for a while, but it wasn't expected to take place until the beginning of the fall television season in late August or early September. The decision to do so virtually immediately the first week after TNT's commitments to the NBA playoffs are over no doubt came as a response to the May 6th television ratings where Nitro, in a 7 p.m. time slot, drew a 1.9 rating as compared to Raw, at 9 p.m. drawing its second highest rating in history, a 4.1. What this means to the short-term future of wrestling is largely a matter of conjecture, but what isn't conjecture is that in some form or fashion it will have major implications. As a best-case scenario for WCW, the hour lead-in will allow them to hard sell a couple of main event matches, no doubt one of which would start nearly every week at about 8:53 p.m., so it would be in progress when Raw starts, and the other held off for the final quarter of the show. It is believed WCW will add some new features to the show and expand the length of matches involving some of the more talented wrestlers, although that is pure speculation at this point. A worst-case scenario is that the WCW booking committee isn't equipped to put on a 2-hour live show each week without diluting the product. The company has been struggling of late to put on quality television. Mondays have been hit and miss and the other shows have largely been awful. Many believe the period where it built up to a slight edge on Monday over WWF was the result of weekly hot-shotting, and that the current ratings are, besides the obvious time slot deficit, the hot-shotting coming home to roost. WCW made a lot of long-term sacrifices by always featuring the same wrestlers and not building anyone new on its prime vehicle, whereas WWF rarely gave away pay-per-view quality matches in response and bit the bullet while it basically stood even in a time slot it used to own. In fact, there are still question marks as to the effect of Nitro and Raw going head-to-head right now. In terms of television interest in wrestling, ratings across the board in March were actually down slightly for each group as compared with the same period 1 year ago, although WWF should show a strong increase in April. House show business, which most felt would take a major turn for the worst with all the major emphasis on the television shows, have increased drastically. However, pay-per-view, which is the leading revenue stream in this industry, took a major tumble from September, when Nitro debuted, through setting record low in December. Both groups have picked up from bottoming out in December with a surprising rebound, but with the exception of Royal Rumble, every pay-per-view show in 1996 has drawn significantly less money than its 1995 counterpart. Expanding Nitro will affect everything: TV ratings, house shows and pay-per-view buys, but it's hard to predict in what ways. The challenge for WCW to make the 2-hour format work is it will have to be able to get over a lot more wrestlers, as a 2-hour show won't be able to ride on the coattails of past reputations built by other promoters of people like Hulk Hogan, who isn't even around right now, Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger. They'll have to create coherent storylines and get over to the mainstream the second rung of people such as Steve Regal, David Finlay, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, etc., and be able to get over the Japanese and Mexican talent as people who are important rather than just very active moving cannon fodder for mid-level wrestlers, thus as talented as they are, having no credibility with the audience that sways the TV ratings in either direction. From the standpoint of TNT, the move is A+ in that the second hour of Nitro, from 8 p.m., will surely do bigger ratings than Thunder in Paradise, which TNT had in that time slot. TNT itself is in a prime time ratings war with other cable networks, most fiercely with USA, and any edge to boost ratings during primetime is very important. That's why, even if Nitro hadn't taken the tumble over the past few weeks due to the NBA commitments, TNT wanted the second hour come the new season. To show how had TNT wanted it, it made the switch as quick as it could. From a WCW standpoint, TNT will be increasing its weekly compensation to WCW, rumored to be in the neighborhood of $2 million per year. Because of this, and because of the surprising profitability of running house shows this year that nobody expected going in, WCW is now a seriously profitable company for the first time in its existence, although some book juggling may account for at least some of that statement. Whether this is good for the industry as a whole for the long term, and we still don't even know the long-term effect of Nitro itself, is something that is another story. Most of the speculation is negative, but this is uncharted waters, and while we can point to history for some answers, the world changes on a daily basis, and history of what happened to pro wrestling in the 50s doesn't necessarily correlate to what will happen in the late 90s. There is still far less pro wrestling on television than sports like basketball, college football, baseball, etc., and pro wrestling on cable still generally draws better ratings at a fraction of the cost. The downside is that those sports, because of reputation, are able to charge more for advertising than pro wrestling, as even though pro wrestling still in comparative ratings looks good, the bottom line of television is selling ads in sports like figure skating because advertisers believe a higher class is watching, make stronger television programming. In this industry, almost nobody has ever made decisions based on the long term, and this isn't the time anyone is going to start now, especially within WCW, where long term consists of every Tuesday afternoon when the previous night's ratings come in. By the time most of you read this, the most important legitimate match involving pro wrestlers in the United States, since the 1920s at least, will have taken place, involving Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn. It's the second meeting of the two. The first took place on July 16 in Casper, Wyoming, with Shamrock, who was generally considered the underdog, going in, winning handily with a guillotine choke in 2:15 and becoming the first UFC World Superfight champion. Since that time, Severn regrouped and won the Ultimate, easily the toughest mixed martial arts tournament ever held in the United States, fighting a total of 49 minutes in 3 matches and really only being on the defensive or in trouble for less than 10 or 15 seconds total. While Shamrock hasn't done any pro wrestling in the United States in several years, he has been ranked among the biggest foreign stars in Japanese wrestling since the Pancrase organization, which he was one of the founders of, opened up in September 1993. While Pancrase's legitimacy has been the subject of much debate and discussion both in the United States and Japan, what can't be debated is that Pancrase has become a strong niche organization in Japan. It drew enough curiosity the first time out to put on a reasonably successful debut pay-per-view show in the United States as well. Severn had done some pro wrestling with little fanfare, generally around Michigan, and worked for UWFI in Japan, including drawing one Budokan Hall sellout against Nobuhiko Takada, before entering his first UFC in December of 1994. There he plowed through the field and gave unbeaten Hoist Gracie his toughest match to that point in time before losing in more than 15 minutes to a triangle choke. Ironically, he never worked for UWFI again after entering the UFC against their wishes. Since that time, based off his UFC success, he was given the NWA title, a championship with a lot of past history being basically a small independent title in the US nowadays, and was one of the headliners on a major stadium show in Japan. Based off his winning the Ultimate, he's expected to headline probably the biggest international wrestling show ever held in the US in a few weeks, and sign with New Japan Pro Wrestling. In the year-end balloting of Japan's Weekly Pro Wrestling, the largest circulation pro wrestling magazine in the world, Severn and Shamrock were ranked 4th and 5th respectively as the most popular foreign wrestlers in the country. It appears right now to be the biggest match of the year in the UFC. Unlike the first match, Severn, 8-2, goes in as the underdog based on the results of the first match. Severn went into the first meeting in less than peak condition. He was in the middle of a behind-the-scenes tug-of-war regarding his marketing and managing, and was on the road nearly every weekend doing pro wrestling matches. Whether he took Shamrock 5,1 and 2 seriously enough going in has also been questioned. It was evident taking the match seriously enough was a mistake Shamrock didn't make, as he capitalized on moves Severn had done in previous matches and where he left openings to put him away. The win, at least on that day, was no fluke, as Shamrock came very close with a choke early before putting him away with a second choke, so he had him in a bad way on 2 occasions in just over 2 minutes. The Severn who showed up in Denver was another story. He left pro wrestling and family life behind and trained full-time in Arizona. Trimmed down to 238 pounds, he physically dominated 3 opponents en route to the Ultimate, including Oleg Toktarov. Toktarov, who many feel is Shamrock's equal as a pure submission fighter, only had Severn in trouble once in a 30-minute match which Severn won in a no-brainer decision. Severn returned to Arizona full-time in early April to do basically the same training that won his the Ultimate, this time focusing on Shamrock. While some noted there was a 5-day break during a key training period just a little more than 2 weeks before the fight to attend a hearing in Detroit and appear at the Tokyo Dome in Japan, he will no doubt be in better condition both physically and mentally than he was during the first match. Whether that will be enough is the question, because Shamrock is expected to show up both bigger and stronger than he was in their first match, and with one hell of a lot bigger reputation and a lot more to lose. Even though Shamrock is considered the better striker of the two, his style is largely to not take chances and wait for the opening. Severn, who was aggressive in his early UFC matches, was content to control his opponents on the ground and strike while down there at the ultimate. There are a lot of behind-the-scenes storylines playing out as well. In UFC, the winner is in line for several more major paydays as Superfight champion. The loser will have a tougher road. In pro wrestling, this is the top star in Pancrase, the supposed and disputed real deal, facing someone who is expected to be a top star for New Japan. Certainly not the real deal except when it comes to financially. From a marketability standpoint, this is a loss that neither man can afford. While Shamrock can afford it in Japan, the loss would be a blow to the hardcore Pancrase fans, although Severn's reputation is such there that it isn't like someone who is real is losing to a Hulk Hogan-type pro wrestler. In the US, Shamrock, 32, is just starting to emerge from the mystique of the Gracie family, which won't answer his challenges to become the man in a burgeoning and controversial sport, with potential major magazine articles, movie roles and endorsements all hanging in the balance. Severn, at his age, his window of opportunity is very small and he simply can't afford the time to rebound effectively from a second loss, not to mention that the clock is working against him in being able to maintain beating the guys at the top level. An exciting and very even match, which is always a possibility but one never knows in a legitimate situation, could leave enough on the table that there would be clamoring for an eventual third match, but it would be difficult unless Severn wins. In the history of American pro wrestling, legend has it that at least some of the early World Championship matches, such as Frank Koch versus George Hockenschmidt, were legitimate, or at least legitimate to a point, since there were things going on behind the scenes that are a lot more screwy than things that go on in today's boxing. Perhaps a few matches to settle territorial disputes or to gain control of the lucrative World Heavyweight title, as late as the 1920s, such as the 5-hour Strangler Louis-Joe Stecher match, may or may not have been. It has been written that match was the reason wrestling became worked, because shoots weren't entertaining enough to the casual spectator, but that match took place well after at least 99% of pro wrestling was already a work, so that explanation doesn't hold up. Fact is, none of the participants is alive today, and even if they were, it's doubtful they'd tell the truth. There were definitely double crosses in the ring in the 20s and later than that, and for that matter, some famous ones in the late 1980s and early 1990s as well. But there's a huge difference between a double cross in a supposedly worked match and a legitimate sporting contest. Newspaper reports from the time seem to indicate pro wrestling started being worked around 1915, but there was no doubt many elements of working going back at least a decade or two before that. In another 75 years, no matter what the result, Shamrock Severn will be one of the very few looked back on. And in much the same way, and with the same skepticism among those within pro wrestling, although the skepticism will almost surely in this instance be wrong, long after every worked match from this era has long been forgotten. Coming on the heels of the EFC political fiasco, Viewers' Choice of Canada has cancelled airing the May 17th show, but has given indications is only sitting out because of the imminent pressure and would broadcast the July 12th event. Cablevision in the Northeast has maintained its policy to no longer broadcast UFC events, so the total universe will be in the neighborhood of 20 to 21 million homes as opposed to close to 25 million for WWF and WCW events. The loss of Canada is doubly significant because UFC has done 2 to 3 times the buy rate in Canada as it has done in the United States in recent events, peaking at 60,000 homes, which is a huge chunk of business, like about $540,000 in company revenue, to lose, basically equivalent to a show that went overtime and the finish didn't air on the pay-per-view in terms of unrealized revenue. The record live gate will make up for much of that. At press time, there were 9,400 tickets sold for the event at Kobo, prices ranging from $350 down to $15, which will draw by far the largest crowd in live gate in UFC history. Of course, everything depends on what happens at the next 2 shows, but there is a current thought that the Shamrock Severn winner would defend the title in September. There will be no super fight in July against the Bittetti Fry winner, of which Bittetti would be the heavy favorite. The tentative plans for the WCW Great American Bash pay-per-view show on June 16 in Baltimore, and this is majorly subject to change, is the Giant vs. Lex Luger for the WCW title, Conan vs. Sting for the US title, Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson vs. Kevin Green and Steve McMichael, Dean Malenko defending the Cruiserweight title against Rey Mysterio Jr., Diamond Dallas Page vs. Great Muta, Booty Man vs. Hugh Morris and Kevin Sullivan vs. Chris Benoit. Randy Savage is expected to be in the corner of the football players for the match. At one point there was talk about Savage being added and making it a 6-man tag, which would have made more sense on a lot of levels, but that is no longer the plan. It's pretty clear that they are counting on the football players to draw because Giant Luger isn't something people are going to want to pay to see, and they've done absolutely nothing to get Conan over to where he being in the semi-main, Even with Sting challenging for a title that means nothing, is a pay-per-view quality draw. There is a lot of speculation that this could be completely overhauled by the end of the weekend, and there may be late changes in titles. The undercard looks more like a collection of bookers playing politics as Bischoff's friend gets put in with a great worker, Sullivan's friend gets to put over Hogan's friend, and Sullivan gets his little deal in there as well. The cruiserweight match wasn't a done deal, and on paper it should easily be the best match of the show, but it's stupid booking. Mysterio Jr. is a total unknown except among Hispanic fans who aren't going to buy this pay-per-view and hardcore fans who are going to buy it whether he's on the show or not. Rather than beat a guy who could be the American answer to the original Tiger Mask or Jushin Liger right off the bat, which would cut off his potential to be something other than a small guy with good moves who nobody takes seriously and neither sells tickets nor merchandise, they should set the guy on fire. Protect him as New Japan did when it first created Tiger Mask and Liger and see how far he can go because he's tailor-made for the young kids audience and they buy the most merchandise, and then make people not too able to wait to see him against quality opponents rather than kill him right off. When New Japan created Tiger Mask, and this is the booking that should be copied because Tiger Mask at his peak was a bigger deal as far as a draw and impact on the business than Liger, they brought him in and used Dynamite Kid, his perfect opponent, to put him over and fed him one guy after another. The established junior heavyweight champ at the time was Tatsumi Fujinami, and instead of having Tiger Mask beat him, which wouldn't have worked at the time due to how pro wrestling was in Japan in those days, they had Fujinami vacate the title and put Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid in for the WWF title and Tiger Mask won it. Actually, copying how Paul Heyman got him over by using his perfect opponents so he looked spectacular on first impression, and as the shampoo commercial says, you never got a second chance to make a first impression, and totally protected him in a tag match against the Eliminators too as to not ruin him. By the time Tiger Mask was in there with a wrong opponent, which is what NWA Junior Heavyweight Champ Leigh Thornton, who in many ways is an equivalent of today's Dean Malenko was, he had been around for 13 months and was over so big that having a less than perfect match for him didn't hurt him in the least. With Kevin Green's recent signing with the Carolina Panthers and their minicamp starting on June 17, there has been some media including ESPN picking up on the fact that the coaching staff doesn't want him doing it and on the fact he's committed to doing so. ESPN reported that WCW would be paying Green $100,000 for the match. I'd be skeptical of that figure but have no way of knowing if it's true or not. Only that they won't get their money's worth if it is because it was only 1 year ago when WWF tried the same angle and was with a tons bigger name player in a tons bigger name market and got tons more publicity. While it did lead to an increase in television ratings and casual talk about the WWF, the ending result of all that, the WrestleMania buy rate, was a huge disappointment. The debuts in the ring of Kevin Nash and Scott Hall with their new gimmicks should be on the following July 6 pay-per-view out of Daytona Beach. The other major lineup announced this week was the Rikitozen Memorial Show on June 30 at the Yokohama Arena. Rikitozen is the supreme legend of Japanese wrestling, something of the equivalent in his culture of Babe Ruth in our culture, complete with dying young. He was stabbed to death at the age of 36 in 1963 in a gangland-style deal at a nightclub, a death that actually killed pro wrestling in Japan for several years before Giant Baba was able to revive it, creating more of a mystique. No matter how good he was or wasn't in the ring, there will never be a Japanese wrestler, at least in this generation, who will ever approach his legend. It is believed both New Japan and All Japan will appear on this show. New Japan held a press conference at the Tokyo Prince Hotel on May 9 and announced 11 matches involving 15 different promotions. All Japan will appear in one of the main events, but All Japan has yet to announce its participants. The main event will be Riki Choshu and a mystery partner, who is believed will wind up being Nobuhiko Takada, against Genichiro Tenryu and a mystery partner, who is believed will be Koji Kanamoto. The drawing dynamics are Takada versus Tenryu never having taken place before, and Takada Kanamoto having met once in a match years ago where Takada supposedly legitimately KO'd Kanamoto with a kick that he didn't pull, along with Choshu having fired Kanamoto from New Japan many years ago and them never facing each other since, and Choshu Tenryu having a feud going back to 1985 All Japan. Other matches announced were Shinya Hashimoto and Junji Hirata versus Keiji Muto and Kensuke Sasaki, Yoshiaki Fujiwara, PWFG, versus Yoji Anjo, UWFI, Satoru Sayama. The original Tiger Mask, founder of Japan Pro Shooting, versus Tiger Mask, Michinoku Pro, a protege of Sayama, Tarzan Goto versus Takashi Okano in an IWA match, Goro Tsurumi versus the Mummy for the IWA Kakata Shijuku promotion, Ryuma Go and Takeshi Miyamoto versus Samurai Max and Fumio Akiyama of Go's Samurai Project promotion, Masato Tanaka and Koji Nakagawa versus the Gladiator and Hisakatsu Oya from FMW, Kendo Nagasaki and Seiji Yamakawa vs. Shoji Nakamaki and a mystery partner for Big Japan Pro Wrestling, a GIA/JWP Mixed 6 Women's match with Chigusa Nagayo and Hikari Fukuoka and Hiromi Yagi vs. Dynamite Kansai, and Bomber Hikari and Toshie Uematsu, and an LLPW match with Shinobu Kondori and Michiko Omukai vs. Eagle Sawai and Michiko Nagashima. AAA's first attempt at running a Triple Mania show outside of Mexico turned into something of a fiasco on May 11 at the International Amphitheater in Chicago. The first of the three Triple Manias of 1996 drew just 2,676 fans, 2,312 paying $50,117.50, incurring somewhere between a $20,000 and $30,000 loss to the promoters. The bottom line when it comes to AAA in the United States in 1996 is that it doesn't have strong enough television to do profitable business at the major league level. The crowds in 1993 and 1994 were during a period when AAA was the only game in town on the Spanish stations, and it aired 7 hours a week on Galavision as opposed to maybe 90 minutes of butchered-up matches now with the confusion of two promotions sharing the television, so at best you're only going to get half the stars on the big show instead of all the stars on television. In addition, AAA itself was a lot hotter and had much better and more over-headline talent. Until the television situation is addressed, and AAA has been in serious contact about strengthening its American television, attempting major shows is only going to lead to more disappointment. The show was a fiasco on a number of other levels, as the build-up for the show in regard to major angles peaking for the card on television was non-existent. There were an incredible amount of no-shows due to the totally disorganized nature of the AAA office, working with a skeleton front office crew and with the guy man in charge, Antonio Pena, being hospitalized all week due to exhaustion leading into the show. In addition, there were numerous personal appearances scheduled the 2 days leading to the show to boost the walk-up, but nobody came from Mexico until the day of the show, since the guys who were supposed to do the appearances for the most part wanted to stay in Mexico because in Mexico Mother's Day was on May 10th. The actual advance was well ahead of the previous show in Chicago, but they only walked up 1,100, which is unheard of for lucha events. The result was a card which ended up only having 4 matches, and only one match, the main event, took place as advertised. In addition, the atmosphere at the event that fans expect for a major spectacular in regard to the bells and whistles, fireworks, light shows, fancy ring entrances, etc., weren't there, and it came off as just another house show. With the exception of the main event, a lumberjack match which was somewhat of a disorganized but crazy brawl that was more like a battle royal with some insane outside the ring action, the work rate underneath was nothing special, and the show contained no angles that one would expect from a major show. The first 3 matches all had the same finish, outside interference leading to heel wins. The idea was to build a theme to the show where Pierroth Jr. would interfere and lead to the heels going over in every match, and he'd get pinned at the end of the show, so the fans got their revenge on him. It was nowhere close to the level of previous AAA house shows in Chicago, let alone the step up from that level one would expect from a major card of the year, although I was told the heat was very strong and match quality would be labeled by US house show standards as a decent to good house show. The no-shows killed the card from a talent level, as it was missing Rey Mysterio Jr., who got married that afternoon, Psicosis, who decided to attend the wedding, Eddie Guerrero, who was booked by WCW in Johnson City on that night, and the two sides had either never reached an agreed-upon price for him to work the show, or he had agreed but changed his mind after being advertised, depending upon which version of the story one wishes to believe. Kevin Sullivan ditto, although he wasn't exactly Mr. Heavy Metal, his visa expired and he didn't get it renewed on time. Super Crazy never got a visa and nobody figured it out until it was too late. Mascara Sagrada Jr. ditto, Caras La Momia, Double ditto, and Halloween and Damien, who were cancelled earlier by the American end of the show as a way to cut down on travel expense from Mexico and weren't advertised as being on the card locally. AAA instead brought in Frisbee and put him under the Sagrada mask. Frisbee is actually a better worker, and brought in El Mosco and had him work twice, including under the Caras gimmick, and people were remarking how Caras looked better than usual. In addition, the best worker who was there, Juventud Guerrera, was working on a very bad ankle and was unable to do any flying moves effectively. Before the show began, Pero Aguayo and Octagon made the announcement regarding the substitutions, although I don't know if refunds were offered, and there were some boos, but they quickly dissipated. 1. Caras La Momia, El Mosco and Arano, El Mosco's out-of-shape father who used to be a pro wrestler in Mexico City, and the Killer beat Blue Demon Jr. and Torero and Mascara Sagrada Jr. Frisbee in 23 minutes when Killer pinned Demon in the third fall due to outside interference from Pierroth Jr. and Cybernetico. This does turn into a pattern. 1 1/2 star. 2. Jerry Estrada and Juventud Guerrera beat Super Colo and Pantera in 23 minutes when Estrada pinned Colo and Guerrera pinned Pantera in the third fall due to outside interference from Patriot Jr. and Cibernetico. Pantera did a great dive but overall looked bad, being out of position a lot. Guerrero was great on the mat but his movement and flying was off due to his ankle. Estrada pinned Colo with a senton off the top and Guerrera pinned Pantera with a leg drop off the top after the interference. Estrada looked great, working all his subtleties as a heel to carry the match. 2 3/4 stars. 3. Picudo and Cibernetico and El Mosco beat Octagon and Ultimo Dragon and La Parca in 23 minutes when Cien Caras and Pierroth Jr. interfered. I guess they'd have done the exact same finish 3 bouts in a row at the exact same time, except that Cibernetico couldn't interfere in a match that he was already part of. Mosco is a rookie who was noticeably green but has potential. The crowd was really into Parca. Dragon didn't work like he does in Japan and Parca did his comedy match, but the crowd was into it. 2 3/4 stars. 4. Conan and Pero Aguayo beat Pierroth Jr. and Cien Caras in 17 minutes of a lumberjack match. All the undercard wrestlers except for 1 or 2 were around ringside and continually interfering. 4 or 5 tables were broken. They destroyed chairs. They also used the ring steps in the ring, a speaker stand, broom handles, etc. It was the basic ECW brawl except involving more people and being less focused. Conan and Aguayo both bled heavily. This match was said to have not been anywhere near the level of a similar match in Los Angeles in December, but it saved the show. Guerrera did the most stuff during the match, including the highlight move of the match, a leg drop off the top of the ladder. It appeared the tables were pre-gimmicked. Conan wound up pinning Pierroth after Colo springboarded off the top rope and put him through a table. 3 1/2 stars. Major events wrestling calendar May 17th to June 17th. May 17th UFC 9 pay-per-view Detroit Cobo Arena. Shamrock vs. Severn. May 18th WWF Philadelphia Core States Spectrum. Michaels vs. Diesel. May 18th All Japan Women The Dream and Future Tokyo Ota War Gymnasium. Satomura and Tamada vs. Shiratori and Omukai. May 19th WCW Slamboree pay-per-view Baton Rouge, Louisiana Centroplex. Giant vs. Sting. May 19th WWF New York Madison Square Garden. Michaels vs. Diesel. May 20th WCW Monday Nitro taping Monroe, Louisiana Civic Center. Giant vs. Anderson. May 23rd All Japan Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center. Tao and Kawada vs. Misawa and Akiyama. May 24th All Japan Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center. Misawa vs. Tao. May 25th Rings Ekaterinburg, Russia. Yamamoto vs. Ramaji. May 26th WWF In Your House pay-per-view Florence, South Carolina Civic Center. Michaels vs. Smith. May 27th UWFI New Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall. Takada vs. Fujiwara. May 27th WWF Monday Night Raw tapings Fayetteville, North Carolina Cumberland County Memorial Auditorium. Michaels vs. Goldust. May 27th WCW Monday Nitro tapings Macon, Georgia Coliseum. May 28th WWF Superstars tapings North Charleston, South Carolina Coliseum. Michaels vs. Goldust. June 1st World Wrestling Peace Festival Los Angeles Sports Arena. Inoki and Severn vs. Fujiwara and Toktarov. June 1st ECW Philadelphia ECW Arena. June 3rd WCW Monday Nitro tapings Asheville, North Carolina Civic Center. June 7th All Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall. June 7th WCW Legends at the Odd Buffalo New York War Memorial Auditorium. Giant vs. Sting. June 9th WWF Chicago Rosemont Horizon. Michaels vs. Goldust. June 10th WCW Monday Nitro tapings Wheeling, West Virginia Civic Center. June 12th New Japan Top of Super Junior Tournament Final Osaka Furitsu Gym. Hashimoto and Hirata vs. Yamazaki and Izuka. June 14th Pancrase Brawl and Budokan pay-per-view taped May 16th Tokyo. Frank Shamrock vs. Rutan. June 16th WCW Great American Bash pay-per-view Baltimore Arena. Giant vs. Luger. June 17th WCW Monday Nitro tapings Richmond, Virginia Civic Auditorium. Results. April 26 Chalmette, Louisiana. Ultimate Wrestling Federation. 285 Casey Blaze B. Dozer, Tommy Orndorff D. Carolina Kid, Ron Simmons Lord Humongous, Cajun Connection B. Marcel Pringle and Micah Ryan, King Parsons NC Don DBSE, Chris Adams B. Punisher. April 26 Bankstown, Australia, Mega Pro Wrestling, Lethal Injection D. Superfire, Mr. Wrestling Steve Hardy, B. Greg Stecker, Pancrase Gregory Smeet, Fever B. John Tolios, George Shame B. Blade Runner DQ, TNT Kid B. Mark Mercedes. May 1st Indianapolis, Pro Wrestling International, TJ Powers B. Mahler, Diamond Dan B. Quicksilver, Lightning Rod B. Neanderthal, Austin and Dallas James B. Autobahn and Jimmy Jack Hammer, Lady Vendetta be Trash Luzigan. Ian Rotten be Madman Pondo. May 3rd Nesawal Coyote AAA, Ravana and Picudo and Super Crazy be Thunderbird and El Mexicano and Aguila Solitaria, Alcon Dorado Jr. and Oro 2 and Mascara Sagrada Jr. be Kraken and Fishman, Ayano 3 DQ, CN Cars and Heavy Metal and Jerry Estrada be Pantera and Ultimo Dragon and Latin Lover. May 3rd Omiya, JWP, Fuseo Nachi be Saburo Yuki Miyazaki be Tomoko Kuzumi, Rieko Amano be Tomoko Miyaguchi, Hiromi Yagi be Kanako Motoya, Mayumi Ozaki be Candy Akutsu, Miyazaki and Amano and Cutie Suzuki and Dynamite Kansai be Matoya and Commando Borishoi and Hikari Fukuoka and Devil Masami. May 3rd Hansonville, Virginia, United Wrestling Alliance, Dave Jericho D. War Machine, Vladimir Koloff be Kasi Hale, Bo James be Mark Malibu DQ, Malia Hasaka be Debbie Combs, Alex Shane be Eddie Bruiser. May 3rd Campbell River, BC, Extreme Canadian Championship Wrestling, 160, Bart Sawyer be Tim Patterson, Ellen Torcha be Magic Dragon, Casey Houston be Iron Maiden, Rambo be Rad Radford DQ, Bart Sawyer and Ole Olson be Davy Street Connection. May 3rd New London, Connecticut, Connecticut Pro Wrestling, 100, Rip Morrison be Maverick Wild, Bob Evans be Troy Young, Johnny Royal be Romanian Wolfman, Thunderstorm be Pinky Petunia, Crusher Hughes be Pulverizer, Evans be Royal, Storm be Hughes, Storm be Evans to win tournament. May 3rd Crossville, Tennessee, Hardcore Championship Wrestling, Kroll the Deathstalker be Convict, Larry Valentine be Steve Neely, Strictly Business be Shane and Steve Morton, Tony Falk and Quinton Charisma be Troy Eaton and Cruel, Tracy Smothers be John Flynn. May 4th Nanaimo, BC, Extreme Canadian Championship Wrestling, 200, Bart Sawyer be Tim Patterson, Ellen Torcha be Magic Dragon, Casey Houston be Iron Maiden, Rambo be Rad Radford DQ, Bart Sawyer and Ole Olson be Davy Street Connection. May 4th Morristown, Tennessee, Tennessee Mountain Wrestling, 150, Rick Savage be Bill Snow, Steve Skyfire be Dave Jericho, Dirty White Boy be 8-Ball Jones to win TMW title, The Olympian and James Blevins DDQ Mongolian Stomper and Chris Powers, Olympian 1 Battle Royal. May 4th Liberty, Texas, World Class Wrestling Federation, 300 Sellout, Bruiser Bennett be War Dog, Doc Holliday be Frank DeFazio, Mark Von Erich Kerbob Strong, Tugboat Taylor be Manu, Sheik Abu Dhabi, Don Serrano be Hog Young. May 4th Alexandria, Virginia, Independent Pro Wrestling Alliance, 125, Earl the Pearl be Johnny Graham, Mark Schrader be Johnny Desire, Lucifer be Cat Burglar, Justin St. John be Jimmy Z, Bad Crew be Axel Rotten and Corporal Punishment DQ, Warrior be Steve Corino, Jimmy Cicero be Jason Jaguar, Big Slam Vader, Walter McDonald be Bill Wiles of Johnny Gunn be Q Ball Carmichael DQ. May 4th Nora, Virginia, United Wrestling Alliance, Cossie Hale be Pitbull, Stan Lee be Eddie Bruiser, Mattering Ram be Eddie Golden, Iron Manker War Machine, Debbie Combs and Mark Malibu be Malia Hasaka and Bo James. May 4th Davie, Florida, International Pro Wrestling Association, Midnight Rider be Pat McGuire, Alex G be Mike Larea, Vampire Warrior be Barry Houston, Joe DeForia be Norman Smiley, EMLL Black Magic, Johnny Evans and TJ Jackson and Death Row 3260 be Bobby Rogers and Bobby Brooks and Gorilla Monsoon Jr., Greg Valentine be Rusty Brooks. May 4th Ukiah, California, All Pro Wrestling, 187, Joe Applebaumer 1 Battle Royal, Bill Calhoun be Gallo Caliente, Steve Rizzono be Jason Clay, Applebaumer and Boom Boom Kamini be Aaron O'Grady and Rick Turner, Chris Colby Matt Hyson, Cowboy Lang be Lil Nasty Boy, Robert Thompson and Hyson be Frank Dalton and Michael Modest. May 4th Flushing, New York, Ultimate Championship Wrestling, Black Panther be Rio de Plato, Pharaoh be Makuma DQ, Teddy Reed be Boss Hog, Tommy Cairo be Derek Domino, Shark Attack Kid be Gary Reno, Rick and Mike Matrix be Blitzkrieg and Crazy Ivan, Falcon Copiris be Tiger Khan DQ. May 5th San Bernardino, California, Empire Wrestling Federation, 110, Cincinnati Red be Brian Rogers, Third Dimension be Vic Victory DQ, Suicide Kid be Gary Key, Tamatoa be Matt Sinister and Dick Danger, Haystacks Brothers be Johnny Love and John Black, Bobby Bradley Gerzuma, KGB May 6th Memphis, USWA, Cyberpunk Ice be Tony Falk, Remo be Jesse James Armstrong, USWA title, Doug Gilbert be King Mabel DQ, Bill Dundee and Samantha be Cyberpunk Fire and Miss Texas, Brian Christopher B. Jerry Lawler, Unified title, Christopher B. Jeff Jarrett DQ. May 7th, Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Block A of CMLL welterweight title tourney. Rey Bucanero be Fantastic. Black Panther be Olympus, Astro Jr. be Atlantico, Mascara Magica be Guerrero Negro. Panther be Bucanero, Magica be Astro, Magica be Panther to advance to finals 5-21. May 7th, Okayama, JWP, Tomoko Kuzumi be Yuki Miyazaki, Fuseo Naochi and Rieko Amano be Kanako Matoya and Candy Akutsu, Mayumi Ozaki be Commando Borishoi, JWP Junior title, Hiromi Yagi be Tomoko Miguchi, Cutie Suzuki and Dynamite Kansai be Hikari Fukuoka and Devil Masami. May 8th, Orlando Disney Studios, WCW Pro Tapings, 600 sellout / all freebies. Non-squash results, Craig Pittman and Jim Duggan be VK Wall Street and Mark Starr, Booty Man be Steve Dahl, Harlem Heat DDQ Masa Chono and Masa Saito, Chris Benoit be Brad Armstrong, Akira Hokuto be Bull Nakano, Wall Street be Star, Brad Armstrong be Ric Flair DQ, Medusa be Hokuto, Giant be Dahl, Pat Tanaka be Chip Minton, Disco Inferno be Billy Kidman, Kid Flash, Sting be Hugh Morris, Wall Street be Pittman, Medusa be Nakano, Bobby Eaton and David Taylor and Steve Regal be Brad and Scott and Steve Armstrong. May 8th, Nagoya, Social Pro Wrestling Federation, Atsuno be Exciting Yoshida, Kyoko Ichiki be Emi Motokawa, Cougar and Masahiko Kochi and Yoshida be Ultraman Robin and Dangerous Uchida and Phantom Funakoshi, Hiroshi Shimada and Koichiro Kimura be Madness and Ichiro Yaguchi, Yoshiaki Yatsu and Isamu Teranishi be Shimada and Kimura, Yatsu and Teranishi be Madness and Yaguchi. May 9th, Kamagaya All Japan Women, 1340, Yoshiko Tamura be Genki Misae, Kumiko Makawa be Yumi Fukawa and Yuka Shina, Saya Endo and Kaoru Ito be Shaparita Asari and Tanny Mouth, Yumiko Hata and Tashio Yamada be Tomoko Watanabe and Kyoko Inoue, Mima Shimoda be Ri Tamada, Asia Kong and Atusko Mita be Mariko Yoshida and Manami Toyota. May 9th, Tokyo Korakuen Hall Pro Wrestling Crusaders, Watanabe be Takagi, Ryu be Judas, Nozawa be Nagase, Super Rider D Universal Power X, Shara and El Hijo del Santo be Fuerza Guerrera and Blue Panther, Hiroshi Shimada be KY Wakamatsu, Kenji Takano and Batman, Great Sasuke, be Jabura and Grand Naniwa. May 9th, Johnson City, Tennessee, Southern States Wrestling 75, Scotty McKeever D. Scott Sterling, Major De Beers be David Lynch, Danny Christian be Justin St. John, Malia Hasaka be Debbie Combs to win NWA Women's title, Bo James be Tracy Smothers, Frank Parker and Roger Anderson be Ricky Morton and Bobby Fulton to win SSW tag titles. Morton won Battle Royal. May 9th, Bakersfield, California, Slammers, Bruce Bodine be Samoan Kid DQ, Jesus Zapata be El Espirito, Samoan Kid be Dynamite D, Hombre de Oro be Tyrone Little, Movie star Mike and Jeff Lindbergh be El Toro Bravo and Bodine. May 9th, Shelbyville, Tennessee, All-State Pro Wrestling, Kid Sensation be Big Daddy Jack, Ashley Hudson be Tony Falk, Woogie Woogie Boy D. Corey Williams, Pula Khan be Gypsy Joe DQ, Ben Mullins and Larry Valentine and Sensation be Keith and Ken Arden and Yoshi Kwan DQ. May 10th, Hamilton, ONT, WWF, 11,515, Bob Holly be Sexton Hardcastle, Smoking Guns be Gangsters in Paradise, Sammy Slick aka Samula Anoya and Night Train aka Matthew Anoya, Justin Bradshaw be Barry Horowitz, WWF Tag Titles, Body Donnas be Godwins, Mark Marrow be Brooklyn Brawler, Mr. Perfect Referee, Jerry Lawler be Razor Ramon, Mankind be Jake Roberts, Ultimate Warrior be Vader. May 10th, Reading, Pennsylvania, ECW, 375, Bubba Ray Dudley and Devon Dudley be JT Smith and Little Guido 2 stars, Sabu be Damien, Taz be Axel Rotten 1 star, ECW title, Raven be Hack Myers 1 star, ECW TV title, Too Cold Scorpio be New Jack 2.5 stars, Chris Jericho be Mikey Whipwreck 3.5 stars, Rob Van Dam be Shane Douglas 3.75 stars, Brian Lee be Tommy Dreamer 3 stars. May 10th, Dallas Sportatorium, Continental Wrestling Alliance, Bobby Duncombe Jr. be Dog of War, Action Jackson and Al Jackson D. South Central LA, Charlie Norris be Larry Green, Bo Vegas and Devin Michaels be Rod Price and Tim Brooks, Scott Putski be Firebreaker Chip DQ. May 10th, Lodi, New Jersey, NWA, 400, Lost Boys be Ghetto Blaster and Psychotron, Gino Caruso be Metal Maniac, Cousin Luke be Rick Ratchet, Johnny Gunn be Twiggy Ramirez, Bad Attitude be Sons of Gestapo, Ricky O and Frankie Burns be Nick Niosi and Martini, Mr. Puerto Rico,
Ralph Soto b. Virgil DQ, Tommy Cairo b. Derek Domino, Vinnie Powers b. Rocco Dorsey, Inferno Kid b. Ace Darling.
May 10th Fall Branch, Tennessee, Southern States Wrestling 90, Scotty McKeever d. Scott Sterling, Wolfman and David Lynch b. Bubba and Justin St. John, Debbie Combs b. Malia Hasaka to win NWA Women's title, Roger Anderson and Frank Parker and Sheik White b. Christian Brothers and Steve Flynn.
Ricky Morton b. War Machine DQ, Tracy Smothers b. Bo James.
May 10th Rome, Georgia, North Georgia Wrestling Alliance, Randy Tucker b. Sergeant Poison, Superstar b. Mr. Olympia, Nasty Critter b. Ken Arden, Jailhouse Rocker b. Kid Ego, Scott Protter and Dusty Dodson b. Keith and John Arden. May 10th Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Risk Taylor b. Scott James, Michael Collins b. Jimmy Sharp DQ, Richie Dye b. New One Man Gang DQ, Chuck Colton, Rick Justice b. Joel Travis and Masked Gang, Randy Watkins and Outpatient b. Frankie Lee and Sharp. May 11th Yokohama Bunka Gym, All Japan Women WrestleMarine b. at 96 to 5,100 sellout, Tomoko Watanabe b. Yoshiko Tamura, Yumiko Hata b. Saya Endo, Kumiko Maikawa and Atsuko Mita b. Flora Metallica and Chikako Shiratori, Mariko Yoshida b. Yumi Fukawa,
Chiquita Azteca Esther Moreno, and Bison Kimura b. Shaparita Asari and Toshio Yamada, Asia Kong b. Rita Mata, Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue b. Manami Toyota, and Mima Shimoda 5214.
May 11th Philadelphia ECW Arena, ECW 1000 sellout, El Puerto Ricano NC Damian 2 1/4 stars, Devon Storm and Damian Kane b. Devon Dudley and Bubba Ray Dudley DQ 2 1/4 stars, JT Smith and Little Guido b. Axel Rotten and Hack Myers 1 star, Taz b. Beef Wellington 1/2 of 1 star, triangular match for ECW title, Raven 1 over Pitbull No. 2 and Sandman 3 1/4 stars, Chris Jericho b. Mikey Whipwreck 3 stars, ECW TV title, Shane Douglas b. 2 Cold Scorpio to win title 3 3/4 stars,
Rob Van Dam b. Sabu 4 stars, Gangstas and Tommy Dreamer b. Eliminators and Brian Lee 3 3/4 stars.
May 11th Syracuse, New York, WWF 4230, Justin Bradshaw b. Barry Horowitz, Smoking Guns b. Gangstas in Paradise, Mark Marrow b. Brooklyn Brawler, Mr. Perfect Referee, Jerry Lawler b. Razor Ramon, WWF Tag Titles, Body Donnas b. Godwins.
Mankind b. Jake Roberts, Ultimate Warrior b. Vader.
May 11th Johnson City, Tennessee, WCW 4400, Alex Wright b. Disco Inferno 2 1/4 stars, Booty Man b. Arnold Anderson 1/2 of 1 star, Chris Benoit b. Eddie Guerrero 4 stars, Street Fight Nasty Boys b. Public Enemy 3 1/2 stars, WCW TV title Lex Luger b. Jim Duggan 1/2 of 1 star, Randy Savage b. Ric Flair 3 1/2 stars, WCW title, The Giant b. Sting DQ 2 1/2 stars. May 11th Boonville, Indiana Hook and Shoot Promotions Shoot Show, 319 sellout, Pancrase Rules, Russ Paxson b. Kevin Simmons, Jay Oppenheim b. James Douglas, Phil Stropolino b. Sean Brockmole, Todd Broadway b. Casey Geyer, UFC Rules, Gary Myers b. Nick Starks, Geza Coleman Jr. b. Lance Trammell. May 11th Himeji LLPW Rumi Kazama b. Mikiko Futagami, Shinobu Kandori b. Carol Midori, Karula b. Yasha Kuranai, Okino and Michiko Nagashima and Eagle Sawai b. Michiko Omukai and Mizuki Endo and Norio Tadano. May 11th Wind Gap, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Championship Wrestling, Jimmy Deo b. Jimmy B. Good, Troy Mest and Johnny Graham b. Shane Shadows and Julio Sanchez, Cremator b. Race Richards, Dave Keller b. Reckless Youth, Double Delight b. DZ Gillespie and Don Montoya, Max Crimson b. Akita Chaos, Super Ninja b. Diablo Macabre, Mark Mest b. Ray Odyssey, King Kong Bundy b. Johnny Gunn DQ. May 11th Hammond, Indiana, Windy City Wrestling, Blue Thunder b. TL Storm, Brandon Bishop b. Ivan Urkoff, Wrecking Crew b. Bad Influence, Twin Turbo DDQ Ripper Manson, Sybil b. Candy Divine to win WCW title, Ken Patera b. Blackjack Bennett, Brett Saunders b. Steve Boz, Terry Allen b. Ninja Warrior, Ken Erickson Kerr Lance Christopher, Turbo b. Johnny Stewart, Mike Sampson b. Mighty Kodiak, Steel Brothers b. Fallen Angels, Turbo 1 Battle Royal. May 11th Brighton, Tennessee, American Wrestling Alliance, Blade Boudreaux b. Charlie Laird, John Turman b. Johnny Reb, Derek King b. Midnight Cowboy, Terry Golden DDQ Chad Austin, Blackjack Daniels and Bad News b. Tim White and Danny B. Good, Randy Rocket b. Tim Hansen, Moondogs NC Chris Gray and Golden. May 11th Chattanooga, ABWF, Mike Mercedes and Paul Jones b. Vic Rose and Akbar Rashid, Billy Montana b. Black Patriot, Glamour Boy b. Richie Dye, Johnny Blaze b. Jimmy Sharp. May 11th Asheville, North Carolina, Great American Wrestling Federation, 105, Bonomo Joe B. John Owen, Chris Steele Hart B. Ricky Rocket DQ, Dr. Dan and the Orderly DDQ Eddie Golden and Stan Lee, J.D. Sullivan B. Boris Dragorf, Viper B. Carolina Heartbreaker, Raisin Kane B. Wild Child Grunge, Georgia Express B. Terminator Rex and the Butcher, Mike Murphy DDQ KC Thunder, May 11th Wilmington, East Coast Wrestling Association, 575, Mr. Ulala B. Bobby Piper, Glenn Osborne B. Armageddon, Primo Carnera 3-1 Battle Royal, Little Louie B. King Sleazy, Dr. Destruction and Commando B. Rockin' Ronnie and Cowboy Blaze, Cheetah Master 1 Battle Royal, Boogie Woogie Brown and Inferno Kid B. Steve Corino, and Lance Diamond, Cheetah Master B. Ace Darling. May 11th Wilmington, North Carolina, CCWA/ICW Gorgeous George 3B Mike Youngblood, Southern Express B Dave Blanchard and Soulman, Mark Ash B Agent Steel Mike Majors, Darkstar NC Swede Stone. May 12th Knoxville, WCW 2800, Alex Wright B Disco Inferno, Booty Man B Arnold Anderson, Eddie Guerrero B Chris Benoit Street Fight, Nasty Boys B Public Enemy, WCW TV title Lex Luger B Jim Duggan, Randy Savage B Ric Flair, WCW title, The Giant B Sting DQ. May 12th Tokyo Korakuen Hall, New Japan, 1658, Akitoshi Saito B Koji Kanamoto, Hiro Saito B El Samurai, Kengo Kimura and Michiyoshi Ohara B Satoshi Kojima and Osamu Nishimura, Akira Nagami and Kunyaki Kobayashi B Takashi Iizuka and Tadao Yasuda, Junji Hirata and Tatsuhito Takaiwa B Yutaka Yoshi and Keiji Muto, Kazuo Yamazaki B Tokumitsu Ishizawa, Shinya Hashimoto B Yuji Nagata, Tatsutoshi Goto and Shiro Koshinaka B Masa Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan. May 12th Yu-Gi-Oh! All Japan Women, 1740, Genki Misai B Yoshiko Tamura, Kaoru Ito and Yumi Fukawa B Saya Endo and Yukashina, Mariko Yoshida B Kumiko Makawa, Tashio Yamada and Atsuko Mita and Tomoko Watanabe B Tanny Mouth and Kyoko Inoue and Yumiko Hara, Asia Kong and Ri Tamada B Manami Toyota and Shaparita Asari. May 12th Atsu LLPW, Mikiko Futagami B Mizuki Endo, Yasha Kuranai B Michiko Omukai, Norio Tadano B Carol Midori, Rumi Kazama and Shinobu Kandori and Karula B Okino and Michiko Nagashima and Eagle Sawai. May 12th Sendai, Yoshimoto Pro Wrestling, 580, Bison Kimura B Fujimura and Abe and Koyama, Kimura B Floor Metallica and Lady Connors, Kimura B Bloody Phoenix, Mima Shimoda B Chikako Shiratori, Lioness Asuka and Shochito Hamada B Jaguar Yokota and Esther Moreno. May 12th Kawasaki, Gia, Meiki Numao 1 Battle Royal, One Night Rookies Tournament, Meiko Satomura B Numao Sonoko Kato B Chihiro Nakano, Toshie Uematsu B Matsumoto, Toshie Sato B Ishii, Shikeo Nagashima B Sato, Kato B Nagashima, Satomura B Uematsu, Kato B Satomura to win tournament. May 12th Los Angeles All Nations Center, Antonio Alvarez Promotions, Guerrero Azteca B Apondo Negro, Tigro Oriental and Gemini Kid B Vandal Drummond and Lobo Salvaje, Angel Star B Shamu Jr. Crazy Boy and Corsario de Plata and Rayo de Plata B Al Marietta and Rosa Salvaje and Shamu Jr. Piloto Suicida and Mercurio and El Psicodelico B Superboy and Capitan Oro and Genesis. May 13th Nashville, Tennessee, WCW Monday Nitro Tapings, 5, 700 halves, 942 paid, Rick and Scott Steiner B Public Enemy 2 3/4 stars, Chris Benoit B David Taylor 1 1/2 star, Ric Flair B VK Wall Street 2 1/2 stars, WCW title, The Giant Kerr Lex Luger 1 1/4 stars, Alex Wright B Disco Inferno Dud, Jushin Liger B Billy Kidman 3 stars, Eddie Guerrero B Steve Regal 1 1/2 star, Street Fight, Nasty Boys B Public Enemy 2 1/2 stars. Special thanks to Jeff Bowdren, Ron Lemieux, James Titus, Mark Taylor, Roland Alexander, Greg John, Georgianne Macropolis, Peggy Watkins, Chuck Longerman, Scott Cornish, Bart Orkline, Sarah Moore, John Donovan, David Milliken, Dan Paris, Chris Savisa, Alex Merves, Jeff Osborne, Tim Whitehead, Kurt Brown, Marcus Watkins, Danny Deese, Oliver LaPrade, Dan Moreland, Lance Levine, Jesse Money, Lou Pickney, Stuart Kemp. Japanese Television Rundown. April 14th All Japan. 1. Steve Williams pinned Tamon Honda with a Dr. Bomb. Only the last 3 minutes aired, but what aired was good. 2. Gary Albright pinned Jun Akiyama with a killer German suplex. Lots of submissions going back and forth. 3 stars. 3. Stan Hansen pinned Albright with a lariat. Real bad. 1/4 of 1 star. 4. Kenta Kobashi pinned Williams after a leg drop off the top rope. Only about 6 minutes aired and you really couldn't get a feel of how the 27-minute match was from what aired. It was stiff and there was nothing wrong, but nothing jumped out as being something special either. Clearly at least the finishing part of the match was nowhere close to the level of some of the matches these two have had in the past. April 20th, New Japan. 1. Keiji Muto and Kensuke Sasaki beat Shinya Hashimoto and Junji Hirata in 1730 when Muto caught Hirata in the figure 4. About half the match aired on TV. It was kind of dull in the middle but picked up at the end. 2.5 stars. 2. Tatsumi Fujinami and Shiro Koshinaka beat Masa Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan in 1308 when Koshinaka pinned Tenzan after a power bomb. All action match but not much heat. 2.5 stars. 3. Fujinami and Koshinaka beat Muto and Sasaki in 1332 to win the tag team tournament. It opened hot but slowed in the middle as they mainly worked over Sasaki. The work was stiff but there wasn't a lot of heat. Muto looked good when he tagged in and it turned into a good match in the latter stages before Fujinami pinned Sasaki with a rolling reverse cradle. 3.25 stars. April 21st, All Japan. 1. Akira Tao pinned Williams in the finals of the Champion Carnival. The match had super heat from the start and was an excellent All Japan style match with the stiffness and psychology and teases of spots that all the fans know. Both looked great here, Tao in particular. Williams isn't quite at the peak form he was at before the suspension, but he's still the best American heavyweight when it comes to working on top in Japan. Much of the match was built around Williams attempting the Oklahoma Stampede, which he did in the first few minutes, and Tao teasing the Nadawa. He finally hit a Nadawa off the apron. They traded near falls at the end before Tao hit a high kick to the head and got the pin with the Nadawa. 4.5 stars. April 27th, New Japan. 1. Muto and Sasaki beat Chono in Tenzan when Sasaki pinned Chono after a lariat. Chono did a good job as a heel threatening the television announcer. Solid match but nothing special. 2.5 stars. 2. Shinjiro Otani and Koji Kanamoto and Taka Michinoku beat Gran Hamada and Jushin Liger and El Samurai. About half of the 19-minute match aired on television and it was excellent. Hamada was incredible for his age. Otani and Kanamoto continue to improve and are among the best workers in the business now. Michinoku, who is a good worker, was actually almost out of his league because the rest of the guys were so good. Michinoku pinned Samurai with a Michinoku driver, which is similar to a Northern Lights bomb. 4.25 stars. 3. Hashimoto and Hirata beat Satoshi Kojima and Osamu Nishimura in about 6 minutes. Match was good, but too short. Hashimoto ended up making Nishimura submit to an armbreaker. 2.5 stars. April 28th, All Japan. 1. Johnny Ace and Albright and Toshiaki Kauda beat Miwaru Misawa and Kobashi and Akiyama in 1946. Another excellent All Japan style match. Albright is blending in with this group far better than I'd have imagined as they work to his strengths and the people believe his suplexes and submissions. Akiyama has improved into a top 10 in the world worker, which doesn't hurt. Everyone looked great and there was nothing wasted in this match and that everything done was to slowly build to a big spot. Actually, Akiyama and Albright were the highlight early, although the match heat was Kobashi and Kawada against each other. At the finish, Albright used 2 German suplexes on Kobashi, with Kobashi getting saved the first time and kicking out of the second. Kawada then used a high kick on Kobashi, and Albright hit a dragon suplex on him for the pin. 4.5 stars. May 5th, All Japan. 1. Hansen and Jumbo Tsuruta beat Takao Mori and Tamon Honda in 8:36 when Hansen pinned Mori with a lariat. About what you'd expect. 3/4 star. 2. Dan Crawford and Doug Furness beat the Patriot and Manukia Mossman in 11:40 when Crawford pinned Mossman with a backwards flip-over superplex. Crawford and Furness did an awesome job of carrying Mossman, who showed a ton of potential in this match. Mossman looks better every time he's on TV. Lots of great near falls at the end, including several with Mossman about the score of the pin that had the people believing the upset could happen. Crawford is as good as anyone in the business in putting together a finish. 3.75 stars. EMLL. The TV is being built around a 3-week-long Tuesday night tournament at Arena Coliseo for the vacant CMLL welterweight title. Pantera held the title when he left the promotion, although he actually went to Japan and dropped the strap to Super Delphin. Anyway, they are running 2 different 8-man tournaments on May 7th, which was won by Mascara Magica beating Black Panther in the finals, and May 14th, with the winners facing for the title on May 21st.
The May 14th tournament will have Angel Azteca, Zumbido Felino, Alacrán de Durango, Ciclón Ramirez, Yone Jinjin of Michinoku Pro in Japan, Karloff Lagarde Jr. and Ultraman, not the same one as in Tijuana.
Rey Mysterio Miguel Lopez claimed that when Conan was in Tijuana for Kids Day, he went to him and asked him for help in getting on local television in Los Angeles. Mysterio and WWO on CH
22 in Los Angeles on Saturday's drawing between a 4 and 5 rating, and suggested that the two against each other would be a hot drawing feud in Tijuana because of all the local press.
Mysterio said he'd be willing to do but wanted to see how everything turns out first, and said he had nothing to do with AAA getting all the suspensions in Tijuana, that they did so because they were using ECW tactics such as breaking tables, which the commission warned them against using. Mysterio never ran a show on May 5th at the Bull Ring in Tijuana but is working on a June tour. AAA. The next two Triple Mania shows are tentatively set for either June 15th or June 16th in Orizaba, which would have a one-night Champion of Champions Cup in which basically all the named wrestlers in the company will compete in, and June 30th at El Toreo in Naucalpan.
The date at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles has been moved from June 15th to July 13th. The next major show in Tijuana will be on June 2nd, and will be a television taping and feature the wrestlers working the Peace Festival such as Pero Aguayo Conan, La Parca, Cibernetico Pierroth Jr., Ultimo Dragon, Rey Mysterio Jr., Psicosis, and Heavy Metal.
There is also a major card scheduled for May 19th in Monterrey. Kraken, who is getting a strong push as a heel for stealing everyone's mask, used to wrestle as Shu El Guerrero. This past weekend's television saw him add El Con Dorado Jr.'s mask to his collection. The plan is back to doing a Triple Mania at El Toreo in Naucalpan, but no date or lineup official. Another compromise has been worked out, so Conan's suspension in Baja California may be for another month, or even less. New Japan. The only show of the past week was May 12th at Korakuen Hall before 1658 with Shiro Koshinaka and Tatsutoshi Goto over Masachono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan on top.
Both Kensuke Sasaki and Shinjiro Otani, who were scheduled in a singles match, missed the show. Sasaki blew out his knee working the WCW tapings at Disney, while Otani was suffering from food poisoning from the tapings at Disney as well. Otani will be back for the top of the Super Junior tournament on May 23rd, and Sasaki is also expected back at that point. Another wrestler wasn't so lucky as Koji Kanamoto blew out his right knee and is expected to undergo surgery and will be out of action for about 3 months, so he'll miss the tournament. No word on a replacement. UWFI announced its May 27th lineup for Tokyo Budokan Hall as Nobuhiko Okada vs Yoshiaki Fujiwara, replacing Tatsumi Fujinami, who won't be back from his broken nose in time, Masahito Kakihara vs Shiro Koshinaka, Yoji Anjo and Yoshihiro Takayama vs Hiromichi Fuyuki and Geto, Kiyoshi Tamura vs Billy Scott, Hiromitsu Kanehara vs Akira Nagami, Tatsuo Nakano vs Michiyoshi Ohara, and more. The weekend TV aired Fujinami vs Genichiro Tenryu and Great Muta vs Jinsei Hakushi Shinzaki from the Dome. Besides the junior tournament, New Japan will also hold a tournament to determine a challenger for Shinya Hashimoto's IWGP title. The title match will be June 11th in Hiroshima, and it'll be a round robin during the tour with Tenzan, Satoshi Kojima, Osamu Nishimura, and Michiyoshi Ohara. Tour ends June 12th in Osaka with the Super Junior tourney final, Sasaki and Kojima vs Fujinami and Koshinaka and Hashimoto and Junji Hirata defending the IWGP tag titles against Kazuo Yamazaki and Takashi Iizuka. Sting, Ric Flair, The Giant and Randy Savage from WCW will be coming here in either July or August. The Road Warriors return in late June. Hiroshi Hazu will wrestle on July 26th in Ishikawa, which is the main city in his district. Ron Race is being brought in to live at the New Japan Dojo and train full-time so New Japan can create its own giant. Word I'm getting from those who are familiar with him don't give this project much of a chance for success. Other Japan notes. All Japan women were able to sell out Yokohama Bunka Gym for their annual WrestleMarinepiad show on May 11th to the tune of 5,100. It turned out to basically be a one-match show as tag champs Kyoko and Takako Inoue won a non-title match over Manami Toyota and Mima Shimoda in 52-14 when Kyoko pinned Toyota. After the match, a challenge was issued for a title match which should take place shortly. Yoshimoto Pro ran May 12th in Sendai and it was the Bison Kimura show. Kimura first beat 3 rookies, then beat Mexican wrestlers Flor Metallica and Lady Connors in a match which went 30-59 and finished beating Bloody Phoenix.
She beat 6 girls in a row lasting 55-30. Big Japan Pro Wrestling starts its tour May 22nd at Korakuen Hall with Kendo Nagasaki and Seiji Yamakawa vs Axel Rotten and Shoji Nakamaki in a thumbtacks and a balloon match, plus Mr. Pogo vs Shinya Kojika and Sabu vs Hack Myers. War on May 26th at Yokohama Bunka Gym has Hiromichi Fuyuki and Geto and Jado defending their 6-man titles against Anjo and Takayama and Kenichi Yamamoto of UWFI. Lance Storm and Yuji Yasurioka defend their international junior tag titles against Ultimo Dragon and Masaaki Mochizuki and Tatsuo Nakano of UWFI vs Tenryu. No doubt Tenryu will destroy him to set the stage for his singles match against Takada in late July. Tokyo Pro Wrestling on May 30th at Korakuen Hall has tag champs Takashi Ishikawa and Anjo vs Yamamoto and Takayama. Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi on May 23rd at Korakuen Hall now has Fujiwara vs Dick Murdoch and Mr. Pogo and Toryu vs Dick Slater and Masanobu Kurisu as the double main. FMW from May 17th to May 27th has the Gladiator, Horace Boulder, Super Leather and Headhunters on the tour. May 19th in Tokyo has Headhunters and Leather defending their 6-man street fight belts against Masato Tanaka and Katsutoshi Niyama and Tetsuhiro Kuroda. May 27th in Hakata has Pogo vs Tanaka in a street fight and Leather defending his World Brass Knucks title against Gladiator. El Hijo del Santo, Blue Panther and Fuerza Guerrera appeared for Pro Wrestling Crusaders on May 9th at Korakuen Hall, as did Great Sasuke under a different mask as Batman teaming with group leader Kenji Takano. Former New Japan and Calgary area lead manager KY Wakamatsu, who was old 20 years ago, worked the show as well. USWA. Another weak house on May 6th in Memphis. On that show, Brian Christopher beat Jerry Lawler to get the title shot at Jeff Jarrett, and Jarrett kept the title due to outside interference DQ. Virtually nobody was even in the studio this week, so it was a lackluster television show. Tony Falk came out with a new TV title belt bought from him by Jarrett, so naturally he lost it in his first match to Jesse James Armstrong. Bill Dundee attempted to unmask Cyberpunk Fire twice on TV, but both Christopher and Miss Texas made respective saves. No wrestling this week in Memphis, so the TV was pushing a show on May 15th in Tunica, Mississippi with Doug Gilbert, back as a babyface, versus Brickhouse Brown with the winner in line for a shot at Jarrett, Miss Texas versus Samantha in a lingerie match, Christopher vs. Sir Mo in a chain match, and Cyberpunks defending USWA tag titles against Dundee and Reggie B. Fine. Both Dwayne Johnson and Barry Buchanan, Punisher, are due in, being sent by WWF to gain experience. They are doing a heel fan gimmick with a fan who looks like Bubba Rogers, although not as big, heckling the various baby faces at the studio. Ronnie Gossett sent in an interview regarding Jarrett saying that Antonio Inoki, Shawn Michaels and Vader are all after a title shot. He also said Jarrett has become so popular they need to hire security, so they'll probably add a head of security to the entourage with some guy doing a Doug Dillinger gimmick. ECW. The May 11th ECW Arena show was reported as one of the better ECW shows ever in terms of quality wrestling, as every match on the second half of the card ranged from very good to excellent. Crowd was estimated in the 1,000 range. It opened with El Puerto Ricano vs Damien, War/AAA going to a no contest when Sabu did a run-in and put both men through a table. Told it was one of the best openers ever in the building, even though much of the crowd chanted "You suck" at Damien. Devon Storm and Damian Kane beat Bubba Ray Dudley and Devon Dudley via DQ when Devon hit both Bubba and the ref with a chair. JT Smith and Little Guido, James Damian Stone, beat Axel Rotten and Hack Myers. They did a funny spot around this time where Todd Gordon came out and announced that there would be a three-way dance for the ECW title since Pitbull No. 2 and Raven had tied in the non-existent fan balloting. Stevie Richards came out to try and bribe Gordon, but Todd wouldn't listen, but then stole the money saying that's what everyone else in the business does anyway. Taz beat Beef Wellington in 4:53. Wellington looked bad. Raven kept the title in the three-way dance, which went 18-26. Lots of outside interference and catfighting with Francine, Missy Hyatt and Patricia, who is being called the Meanie Babe as a spoof on Booty Babe since Blue Meanie is doing a Shawn Michaels gimmick. Raven pinned Pitbull No. 2 when Sandman low blows him. Sandman got lots of near falls on Raven before losing after being DDT'd on the guardrail. The original plan was for Raven vs Pitbull No. 2 and Sandman vs Louis Spicolli, who was going to show up as Rad Radford, and Sandman was going to destroy a WWF character. Either the WWF got wind of this, or Spicolli has a ton of office heat, because even though he isn't working for WWF, he's still under contract with them and they refuse to allow him to work ECW. After the match, Pitbull No. 2 gave Meanie a superbomb with Sandman's help. Sandman then let Missy make out with Pitbull number 2 only to have Francine go after Missy. Chris Jericho pinned Mikey Whipwreck in 12 minutes in a good match, although there were lots of this match sucks chants. Shane Douglas won the TV title from 2 Cold Scorpio in 26-31 with a belly-to-belly off the top rope. This was said to be by far the best match these two have ever worked together. Douglas said that Scorpio was the best TV champ ever and asked him to strap the belt on him, but Scorpio then took the belt and hit Douglas over the head with it, then put the belt and a chair on Douglas' face and leg dropped him off the top rope. Rob Van Dam pinned Sabu in 1847 with a split-legged moonsault. This was said to be not quite at the level of the previous match but lots of incredible spots. The loser was supposed to say "I respect you" to the winner. Sabu was selling his injuries as if he had broken his back and never said anything. Joey Styles then interviewed Van Dam, who said he didn't respect Sabu, and then shook Bill Alfonso's hand. Paul Heyman came out with Sabu, who talked for the first time mumbling about respecting Van Dam and offered his hand, but Van Dam blew him off and shook Alfonso's hand. Sabu ended up going out on a stretcher. The post-match came off live a lot messier than it reads. Finale was the typical brawl with Gangstas and Tommy Dreamer over Brian Lee and Eliminators in 2046. Dreamer broke a cinder block on Lee's crotch. Richards tried to interfere, had Kimona and Beulah rip at his crotch. Dreamer DDT'd Saturn off the top rope through a table. Dreamer bled and everyone who called here said they thought for sure it was a blade and an angle because they had EMTs act as if they were going to stop the match for blood but let it go on, which was the exact same spot they did the previous show. Finish saw New Jack pin Saturn after coming off the top with a chair on him. May 17th in Glenolden, Pennsylvania, which will be a videotaping, has Scorpio vs. Jericho, Saturn vs. New Jack, Cronus vs. Mustafa, Dreamer vs. Lee, Falls Count Anywhere, Raven vs. Whipwreck for the title, Sandman vs. Van Dam, Taz vs. Axel Rotten, Pitbulls vs. Dudleys, and Myers vs. Kane. May 18th in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which may come close to a company record attendance, as Eliminators vs. Gangstas for the tag titles, a triangle match for the TV title with Douglas, Dreamer, and Sandman, Taz vs. Scorpio, Sabu vs. Whipwreck, Raven vs. Jericho for the title, Pitbulls vs. Bruise Brothers, Falls Count Anywhere, and Smith and Guido vs. Dudleys. The Denver Prime affiliate has said ECW will never air on their station again because of viewer complaints. The other show of the weekend was May 10th in Reading, Pennsylvania, before 375. In the top matches, Scorpio pinned New Jack when Eliminators interfered, Jericho pinned Whipwreck, Van Dam pinned Douglas when Scorpio distracted Douglas, allowing Van Dam to pin him from behind. Lee pinned Dreamer in a match which went outside the building onto a busy street and cars had to swerve to avoid hitting them. Eliminators interfered again. The first Sabu Van Dam match aired on television this past week. I wasn't nearly as blown away by it as most reports. It was a great match for crazy moves. One of the craziest you'll ever see, and from that standpoint it was a must-see match. But it only had one element. But there was no psychology, no transitions, and tons of missed spots, and the match no believability or intensity at all. It was an exhibition of daredevil spots like you'd see indie guys that copy Sabu do, with no regard for having a clue how to work a match. Since a lot of fans watch ECW for crazy spots rather than well-worked matches, maybe it shouldn't be knocked because they blew so many spots, since they tried so many difficult ones, and when you do a match of nothing but crazy spots, they aren't all going to hit perfect unless you're Rey Mysterio Jr. working with Juventud, Guerrero, or Psychosis, and having a good night. Every style has different standards. A great lucha match simply looks wrong to fans who aren't educated to the style. American big bumps and overselling look totally contrived to someone who has watched Japanese wrestling. Japanese submissions look like rest holds to American fans who haven't been educated by wrestlers and announcers to their effectiveness. All pro wrestling is fake, so saying a match looked fake, and this match looked as fake in many spots as a bad prelim match with green indie guys, is often stupid. The finish itself was amazing, with Sabu running across the ring, leaping from a chair onto the top rope and springboarding backward into a moonsault onto Van Dam for the pin. I'd bet the vast majority of pro wrestlers in WWF or WCW who would see that match would think it was terrible, but it does work for its audience. It couldn't hold a candle to previous Sabu vs. Scorpio and Mysterio Jr. vs. Guerrero matches at the arena earlier in the year. Here and there. There are several more changes in the Peace Festival show on June 1st at the Los Angeles Sports Arena from what was in last week's Observer. Terry Funk officially pulled out from the show on May 8th because he basically felt a finish couldn't have been worked out in the triangular match the way it was proposed. Funk originally wanted to be part of the show as an American farewell, doing a triangle match with Sabu and Brian Pillman,
who he pretty much picked himself as opponents, and he had the idea of ending the match with him basically endorsing those two as the future superstars of American wrestling.
However, Sabu had a commitment with Big Japan Pro Wrestling and Pillman got into the Humvee wreck and the focus of the match changed. Plus Funk got over so big with FMW, so it would bad for personal business to do a show that will be far bigger in Japan than the US, where he's no longer the focal point of the match. Chris Jericho will be moved up the card to appear with Conan and Bam Bam Bigelow in the Triangle match. This isn't official at press time, but they were working on getting the Giant Sting match for the WCW heavyweight title. EMLL basically held in its demands to be in 2 matches rather than 1 or pull out, since AAA was involved in 3 matches. So the 8-man tag will turn into a 6-man tag with Dos Caras and Hector Garza and Atlantis versus Silver King and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Gran Marcus Jr., and a singles match will be added with El Hijo del Santo versus Negro Casas, which should strengthen the show.
Jim Neidhart will still work the opener, but no opponent is official yet, although I've heard Mondo Guerrero's name discussed. Ray Stevens was buried on May 11th at the Fremont Memorial Chapel. About 200 people, mainly area wrestlers and wrestling fans from the 60s and early 70s, along with neighbors and family friends, gathered, largely reminiscing about angles and matches and the popularity of pro wrestling in San Francisco during the early 1960s, when it was on television live in primetime every Friday night on the city's leading independent station, KTVU. There were war stories about Stevens' relations with local police, who used to scoop him off his bar stool at 3 a.m. and know him and where he lived well enough to know to deposit him on his front lawn, and how he'd then go out and tear the house down the next night. The funeral definitely signaled the final end of a chapter of local wrestling history, and most everyone recognized it as such. There were tapes of Stevens' matches from the mid-70s AWA, a late 70s tape from Sacramento which is believed to be the only Stevens television match from Roy Shire's Big Time Wrestling that hasn't been lost, and some early 80s WWF clips from the Snuka feud, along with photos of him from childhood and all through his wrestling career. Don Manukia, a former Stanford University and Oakland Raiders football star known as Manuka the North, who held the NWA Tag Team title with Stevens in 1964-65 and became lifelong friends with him, did the eulogy mainly talking about Stevens' habits of racing motorcycles and driving at double the speed limit to get to the area towns.
He talked about bringing Stevens to Stanford alumni functions and how they'd at first respond to Stevens with his thuggish television personality as a heel wrestler, but how they'd all warm up to him. There were no ties to today's wrestling scene evident, and the only wrestler from outside the area who attended was Red Bastian, who crossed paths with Stevens in numerous territories over nearly 40 years. Among others who attended were Eric Peterson, giant German Fritz von Goering, who once placed second in the Mr. America contest to Steve Hercules Reeves, Robert Kinji Shibuya, Pepper Gomez, Jerry Monty, Juan Camanian, the great Pampero Firpo, Paul Diamond, the original Juan, Art Dominguez, Cecil Dubois, Alexis Smirnoff, Rick Ronaldo, Dano Oshaker, Mitsu Arakawa, Ricky Thompson, Woody Farmer, former referee Frank Nosti, Midget Cowboy Lang, manager Gerhard Kaiser, John Swensky, a former world junior heavyweight champion in the 30s, local indie promoter Roland Alexander, and several of his wrestlers, including Michael Modest, who greatly resembled the photos of Ray Stevens from the 50s and basically does a Stevens gimmick. I thought I'd seen it all, but seeing someone try to hard sell lifetime subscriptions to their wrestling newsletter for $10 at a funeral was something new. Most of the local sports sections didn't make a mention of the death, although the San Jose Mercury and Oakland Tribune did run lengthy articles in the obit section. Jeff Osborne, who does a shoot newsletter, ran a shoot show on May 11th in Boonville, Indiana, before a packed house of 319, paying $3,000. All reports we got on the show were positive, even though the main event didn't take place, as Mike Kennedy failed to show up to face Scott Bessick. Kennedy had run down Bessick on the internet. The audience was said to be a total hardcore respectful audience, in that nobody cried out for blood or was disappointed when every match hit the mat. People were happy because Bessick did a submission clinic in the ring. Bessick also ran down Kennedy and called him a little bitch for not showing up. Geza Coleman Jr., who was an alternate in a UFC and training partner of Dan Severn, beat Lance Trammell with an armlock after using some knees and elbows to the face to swell him up. Gary Myers, who won the Best Fighter trophy, beat Nick Starks, who is a columnist for Inside Kung Fu and is being considered for the July UFC tournament, with a choke in 8 minutes of which Myers totally controlled. They were the only 2 UFC rules matches, while the undercard was basically under jiu-jitsu rules or pancrase rules without rope breaks. It was funny, because a local indie wrestling promotion ran head-up with this show in the same small town, and a confused group of picketers ended up picketing the wrestling show. The local TV news ripped the show the night before, calling it a fight to the death. Rey Mysterio, Fuerza Guerrera, Super Astro, Blue Panther and Mil Mascaras are all scheduled for May 17th in Compton, California. According to an area wrestler, when he met Mascaras in 1982, he said at the time he was 45 years old, which would make him 58 now. IWA Hardcore Wrestling is touring Manitoba from May 31st to June 7th with Doink the Clown, Bad News Allen, Ultimo Dragon, Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, Rick Martel, Big Titan Timothy Flowers, Dr. Luther, Johnny Smith, Thomas Singh, The Natural, and Jerry Morrow. They'll be taping TV on June 6th and June 7th with Natural vs. Dragon, Jericho vs. Storm and more. Don't know if Dragon and Jericho arrive on the tour late, because if they don't, it would appear to be a conflict on June 1st. A correction from last week's issue. Gary Myers never attempted to travel in Quebec for the EFC show, so he was never stopped from going across the border. Ken Patera, the former Olympic weightlifter who was one of the biggest stars nationally for about 15 years, 1973-87, worked a show for Windy City Wrestling on May 11th in Hammond, Indiana at the age of 54. UFC. The tentative working idea for the July pay-per-view is to be entitled USA vs. the World, with a tournament with 4 Americans and bringing in 4 foreigners. Among the foreigners is expected to be Frank Loebman, a former European kickboxing champion who knocked out Ken Shamrock under kickboxing rules at a major Pancrase show a few years ago. There will likely be another Ultimate show in December. The Detroit News ran a lengthy article on Dan Severn on May 12. WCW. Nitro on May 13th from Nashville drew 5,700, 2,942 paying $38,620, as Steiners beat Public Enemy in 6:53 when Scott pinned Rocco Rock with a Frankensteiner. 2 3/4 stars. Chris Benoit pinned David Taylor in 4:19 with a Dragon Suplex in a match that didn't do or mean a thing. 1 1/2 star. Ric Flair beat VK Wall Street with a figure 4 in 8:57. 2 1/2 stars, and Giant kept the title going to a double countout with Lex Luger in 4:03. During the finish, Giant ripped the tablecloth and all the wine and food off of Ric Flair's VIP table and choke slammed Luger through the table. 1 1/4 stars. They played it up as if Luger was injured and tried to turn him into a major babyface. From the Florida tapings, it appears as if they are going to start the swerve back to him being perhaps a heel again. They tried to turn the heat up on the Steve McMichael/Flair angle with them hinting but not directly saying they'll meet shortly. Aside from the choke slam at the end, it was a blah show. Crowd was dead. Part of that was because signs were being violently confiscated and there appeared to be a tremendous paranoia among security during the event, which affected the crowd. Best match of the show was a dark match with Jushin Liger over Billy Kidman, although the crowd was dead for it. The Steve Regal-Eddie Guerrero dark match was disappointing. They had people attempting to give cues to the fans how to respond, which I was told also negatively affected the heat. Ratings for May 13th saw Monday Night Raw do a 3.5 rating and 5.1 share, while Nitro at 7 p.m. did a 2.3 rating and 4.4 share. Both numbers are considered very strong for their respective slots. The Nitro replay did a 1.2 rating. The other weekend numbers saw Saturday night do a 2.5, Sunday a 1.5 and Pro a 1.3. Nitro on May 20th in Monroe, Louisiana is scheduled as Giant vs. Arnold Anderson for the title, Sting and Luger vs. Meng and Barbarian, Flair vs. Guerrero and Public Enemy vs. Nasty Boys. At the taping the previous week in Daytona Beach, Jackie Crockett violently ripped a Hogan's Click sign out of a fan's hand. I guess they were afraid people would think WCW fans can't spell any better than WWF fans. Blood Runs Cold apparently has nothing to do with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, but will be a team of 3 ninja heroes to be brought in, one of which is expected to be Brian Clark, Adam Bomb. Akira Hokuto and Bull Nakano appeared at the May 8th Disney tapings in Orlando. They wrestled each other on matches taped for WCW Pro, with Hokuto winning, and each lost to Medusa. Told Medusa looked rusty against the Japanese. Hokuto and Nakano had a really good match, although Nakano's knee is really a mess. With Sasaki having blown out his knee, Masa Saito replaced him as Masa Chono's partner in a DDQ against Harlem Heat. They did a Craig Pittman and Jim Duggan win over Wall Street and Mark Starr, with Wall Street turning on Starr to set up a match the next week which Wall Street won. Chris Benoit beat Brad Armstrong. In the best match of the day, Armstrong beat Flair via DQ. It was weird, because Flair came out with a WCW heavyweight title belt but wasn't announced as champion. It may mean Flair is going to win the title back, although I seriously doubt that Flair is going to make a replica belt and wear it around, or that this match will never air and none of this means anything, or it will air and make no sense at the time it airs. The Giant billed as Paul the Giant White, has been filming a movie in Portland, Oregon called Reggie's Prayer, starring Reggie White, Green Bay Packers, Malcolm Jamal Warner, Cosby, Pat Morita, Karate Kid, and Rosie Greer, NFL star of the 60s. White is the star, playing a guy who quits the NFL to coach at-risk teens. White plays a villain who takes one of White's players hostage. A few more notes about the Giant. Apparently he played basketball at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville after leaving Wichita State, a Division II school, but only played about 2 minutes a game, so he couldn't have been much of a player. Everyone liked him on the team and all he talked about was pro wrestling and Ric Flair. His height when he came in was listed at 6'8", but he grew, and when he left it was listed at 7 feet. I've been told that in reality Kevin Nash, who is about 6'9" or 6'10" legit, is the same height as Paul White. They better put major lifts in White's boots when they feud the two, since White is supposed to be 4 inches taller. No biggie. I remember seeing Andre and Ernie Ladd wrestle and they always looked the same height to me, but they billed Ladd at 6'9" and Andre at 7'5" at the time. Hogan has gotten a lot of pub the last week doing a boxing gimmick with Shaq and Sugar Ray Leonard, and appearing and being interviewed at the Orlando Magic playoff game on May 10th. Hogan and Roddy Piper are doing their first movie together called The Overlords, being filmed in Canada with the two being listed as co-stars along with Gary Busey. WCW pulled a Saturday Gene Okerlund hotline message because he said Nash and Hall were a done deal. I guess the deal is that Bischoff's own storyline is to make it sound like they aren't coming to put doubt into it when they do come. WCW may set its all-time record live gate for the June 7th Legends at the Odd Show in Buffalo. They had topped $120,000 as an advance at press time. The all-time company record is $190,000 for the Flair Funk 1989 match at the Baltimore Bash. Much of the credit for the show's success should go to Dennis DiPaolo, the son of Elio DiPaolo, who is being honored, and WCW, because of the success, is planning on going back when they open the new arena. As of 6 days out, the pay-per-view in Baton Rouge had 4,400 tickets sold and an $86,000 advance, with about 4,000 tickets remaining. Weekend house shows were May 11th in Johnson City, which drew 4,400 paid and $53,600, and May 12th in Knoxville, which drew $2,836,000. Report we got was Johnson City was a great house show with a super hot crowd that got into every match. It was the biggest crowd to see wrestling in Johnson City in about 10 years. In particular, Guerrero vs. Benoit, Public Enemy vs. Nasty Boys, and Flair vs. Savage were all hot matches. Giant Sting main event finish was a DQ when Luger interfered. Savage pinned Flair when Flair first got the pin using a foreign object, but the ref saw it, restarted, and Savage immediately schoolboyed him using tights. Originally Savage was going to be suspended in the angle, but they realized that Flair-Savage is the biggest drawing match they have on the road right now, so Savage is going to be suspended from television, but allowed to work non-sanctioned matches at the house shows. Road Warrior Hawk was injured at the Tokyo Dome show, and I'm not sure one way or another if he's going to be working the pay-per-view this weekend. If he's not, they sure are keeping it a secret, as originally one of the big things they were hyping was Hawk vs. Animal for the first time, but on TV they've left that alone and are more hyping Flair and Savage as a team and Rick vs. Scott Steiner. Road Warriors have been pulled from the Hartford, Philadelphia, New York run at the end of June because they were previously booked by New Japan. And finally, more on Mark Marrow from Eric Bischoff. I don't know that I would or I wouldn't rehire him. There's 3 mistakes that were made the day we parted company at the airport. One is that Johnny confronted me 5 minutes before we were supposed to board a flight to do TV. Bad timing. The second mistake is that he gave me an ultimatum. When someone looks me in the eye and says do this for me, which in his case was put something in writing saying you're going to pay me no matter what happens if I get hurt or I can't wrestle, when someone says this to me, they give me no option. I don't deal well with a gun to my head. The third mistake was on my part because I overreacted to that. I overreacted because Johnny was a guy that everybody who has worked here during the time I've worked here has wanted to fire. They wanted to get rid of him because they didn't believe in him. I gave Johnny opportunities. I protected Johnny. We all think Johnny's a great wrestler now, but a year ago you guys were filleting him like he was a fish. He wouldn't have had that opportunity to become a great wrestler if I hadn't given it to him. He had a contract, he shook hands, he agreed on a deal, and then because he didn't like the tone of my voice when we had an issue over the NASCAR problem, he decided to call Vince McMahon and take a better offer. That to me is not integrity. He may have his reasons for doing it, and he may believe he's right, but if I shake hands with somebody and say this is our deal, I'll cut off my arm before I go back on my word. Johnny said he'd like to leave on good terms, and I don't think agreeing on a deal Giving me an ultimatum and telling me 5 minutes before we get on an airplane is necessarily the greatest way to part company. And I looked him in the eye and said, "No, you're not leaving on good terms, and I sincerely hope you know what you're doing, because you're not coming back." I meant it when I said it. But in reality, as much as I'm still a little disturbed by what happened, I've had time to get over it personally. On TV, they announced Luger being handcuffed to Jimmy Hart during the Giant Sting pay-per-view main event, although with Luger doing the injury angle, no word if he'll be there or not. WWF. The May 10th show in Hamilton, ONT at the Copps Coliseum wound up drawing 11,515 paid and $188,471 Canadian, which would be the largest crowd for a non-pay-per-view and non-MSG house show, probably going back to the Jacques Rougeau retirement show in late 1994. It was the largest in the Toronto-Hamilton market dating back to the 1990 WrestleMania. It was more impressive considering it was a B-team show, as most of the top draws were in Kuwait, and the main event, Ultimate Warrior vs. Vader, was a match that had no angle leading up to it. Warrior pinned Vader at all the weekend shows in what were reported to us as terrible matches. Business should be even stronger this weekend, as Madison Square Garden on May 18th is expected to do its second straight sellout, and Philadelphia the day before is expected to be the largest non-pay-per-view crowd there in many years, with the final matches of both Diesel and Razor Ramon in the WWF. Goldust missed the past weekend because of the knee injury, so they flew in both Jerry Lawler and Mr. Perfect to work the shows. Lawler beat Ramon in the semi-mains, with Perfect working as a heel ref of the match. Debuting in the ring this weekend were the Gangsters in Paradise. I wonder where they came up with that name from. Which are the Samoans dressed up to look like Public Enemy. Samula Anoya is now called Sammy Slick, and his partner, who is his first cousin Matthew Anoya, son of Sika, is called Night Train. They put over Smoking Guns all weekend. Even with the big house show business, there are no plans to go back to doing 2 tours. The philosophy that they had, which was to run arenas only once per year except Madison Square Garden, 6 times, will change, as major markets like Los Angeles and Philadelphia will probably be run 3 times per year. In Kuwait, Ahmed Johnson won the 5-night Kuwaiti tournament, beating Hunter Hearst Helmsley in the finals on May 12. All 5 shows were in the same soccer stadium. Since they were sold shows by the WWF to a local promoter, we don't have legit crowd figures other than they drew big crowds every night. In the tournament, on May 8, Bret Hart beat Leif Cassidy, Owen Hart beat Yokozuna, Steve Austin beat Marty Jannetty, and Johnson beat Aldo Montoya. On May 9, Undertaker beat Isaac Yankem, British Bulldog beat Duke Droese, Savio Vega beat Bob Backlund, and Helmsley beat Butch Miller. May 10 saw Undertaker over Bulldog, Helmsley over Vega, Owen pinned Bret clean, and Johnson beat Austin. May 11 saw Helmsley beat Undertaker via DQ and Johnson pinned Owen. Shawn Michaels worked on top every night, beating Austin, Jannetty, Bulldog, Owen Hart, and Yokozuna. 1-2-3 Kid isn't expected back until June. Tom Brandi, Johnny Gunn, Tracy Smothers, Stacey Porto, Alex Porto, Tony Anthony, Dirty White Boy, and Bill Irwin were all signed on May 10. They will at first only be used at television to put guys over, but will probably be given new names and new gimmicks and some television wins first to give them credibility so they can mean something in jobbing to the bigger names. It's a way to have matches that aren't perceived as squashes on Raw, but not continually have guys like Helmsley do jobs. Smothers, Porto, and Anthony have all been longtime friends of Jim Cornette. The Goldust Undertaker angle was toned down greatly on television. They did a major jump cut when Goldust started licking up Undertaker's thigh right to the point where Undertaker stood up. They also shot the camera angles to not make it look so much like Goldust was pouncing on him, although it still looked that way, and the commentary toned it down a lot by playing it off as if it was all psychological games rather than gay advances. Weekend house shows besides Hamilton saw May 9 in Erie, Pennsylvania do $2,403 and $39,168, May 11 in Syracuse drew $4,230 and $57,963, and May 12 in Binghamton did $3,278 and $61,127, all basically more than double the last time WWF played those markets. Reports from the shows themselves were that the matches overall were bad, with only the Body Donnas and Mero attempting to work hard, and Mero was handicapped by working with Brooklyn Brawler, who hasn't had a good match in 10 years. Speaking of Brawler, he's also the guy wearing the kangaroo suit in Bushwhackers TV matches. The best match on the shows was Lawler Ramon, and that was because Lawler was entertaining doing his mic work as they didn't do any wrestling. They did an angle on Raw taped in Kuwait where Bulldog attacked Michaels on the beach and threw him into the Gulf. Besides Raw, Mania did a 1.8 and Action Zone 1.6 over the weekend. Funny to see on Raw Zebasiah, Dutch Mantle, introduce himself to Jerry Lawler for the first time when they teamed and feuded seemingly forever. The readers' pages. Stevens. Just had to say thank you for the great tribute to Ray Stevens. You'll never know how much it means to me to be quoted in the story. Thank you so much. The story is helping me deal with my sadness as it was such an awesome story. I'm sure you'll be getting tons of kudos for this one and you deserve it. He will be remembered and missed. Ed Moretti. Canby, Oregon. I was fortunate enough to have grown up during the 1962 to 1970 Northern California wrestling era, and my recollections of Ray Stevens could fill a scrapbook. I remember the angle he did with Hercules Cortez, whose only wrestling move was a bear hug. Cortez would have made the Junkyard Dog look like Bret Hart when it came to ability, but Stevens wrestled him like a bullfighter outsmarting a bull. Cortez lost the match in 2 straight falls, the second via disqualification because he had Stevens in the bear hug around the ring post. Stevens sold the spot like his back was broken and had to be stretchered out of the Cow Palace. His death match with Pat Patterson was the result of a long strategic build-up. Patterson had been winning his matches by head-butting his opponents with a loaded mask. Stevens came back and asked for a Texas death match to end the feud once and for all. He entered the ring wearing boxer's headgear and Patterson went nuts. Patterson agreed to throw away his mask if Stevens would wrestle the match without the headgear. Stevens agreed, and about 10 minutes into the match, Patterson pulled a second mask out of his trunks, loaded it and head-butted Stevens. Stevens was busted open and sold it big, losing the next 3 falls in quick order. Finally, out of pure desperation, Stevens grabbed Patterson from behind and crotched him 3 times on the ropes and pinned him. Patterson couldn't answer the bell, earning Stevens his last U.S. title. You always got your money's worth when Stevens was on the card. When I heard of his heart surgery, I sent him a long letter, thanking him for all the memories. I never heard back, but I sure hope he got the letter. John Miller, the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball announcer, once told me that when he was growing up in Hayward and was out trick-or-treating, he was surprised to see Stevens open the door at a house. He used to go to the KTVU studios for the Friday Night Live television show, and Stevens kind of recognized him and invited him in for a glass of whiskey. John, being 14 at the time, kindly declined the offer. It's stories like yours about the history of wrestling over the past 35 years that keep me a subscriber. I realize that most of the readers are younger and prefer the newer stuff in wrestling, so it's a treat when you recognize the history of U.S. wrestling. John Bamberger. San Anselmo, California. I was sad to learn of Ray Stevens' death. Until I read your summary of his career and his status in the game, I wasn't sure how much of the respect and affection I had for him came from the fact that he was, along with Rocky Johnson, Peter Maivia, and Pat Patterson, one of the first headline wrestlers I ever saw. Nostalgia has a way of burnishing the past with a glow it doesn't deserve. Or if it was because I started watching wrestling in 1971 when I was 12 or 13, an impressionable age at which I was continually told on television how great Stevens was. Or the fact when I saw Stevens, I was at best only half smart. It was good to read, 25 years later, that my memories were accurate and the hype, at least in his case, was true. Ray Stevens was as great a wrestler as I thought he was as a half-marked kid. I used to be passionate about wrestling. It gave me some of the greatest heroes and villains of my early adolescence. Stevens, Johnson, Maivia, and Patterson, and a handful of others were magical names to me, figures I loved or hated with an intensity I can only envy today. Going to wrestling matches at the Cow Palace made me feel utterly exhilarated and alive, and Ray Stevens was one of the chief reasons why. Paul Guay. Los Angeles, California. I was channel surfing and found out by accident that another unfortunate milestone had come to pass. The words are sincere when I say I'm saddened to learn of the death of Ray Stevens. I've been watching pro wrestling for 35 years, and without a doubt, he was the wrestler I enjoyed watching most. Whether at the arena or doing interviews, he was unsurpassed. He was at his best in the heel persona. My fondest memory was when I met Stevens in 1971 at a charity bowling event. I was scorekeeper on the lanes that had the team of Stevens, Rupert Collins, and Buddy Atkinson. Senior Stevens was pretty much the same in person as he was on TV. 24-inch neck, gravel voice, talking out of the side of his mouth, and a mean-looking cauliflower ear. He was nice to everyone around and didn't patronize. 2 hours of fun and a lifetime of memories. Fred Cooper. Richmond, California. WCW. The thought of a Steve McMichael and Kevin Green versus Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson match at the Great American Bash makes my stomach turn. It's a match destined to end the career of the Fall Guy as a top-notch wrestler. Celebrity involvement is good for mainstream media attention for the wrestling promotion, but it generally hurts the losing wrestler. WrestleMania is the clearest example of things being done right and wrong. Mr. T's ventures were a success in that it gained enormous exposure and didn't hurt the careers of either Roddy Piper or Paul Orndorff. The reason was in the first WrestleMania he teamed with Hulk Hogan and been training with him. In the second WrestleMania, when he faced Piper, it was in a gimmick boxing match. In the case of LT, his match with Bam Bam Bigelow, although it was a decent match, ended Bigelow as a top star. Surely Bischoff isn't going to do the same with Flair or Anderson when they're two of the few heels in the promotion capable of headlining. Despite both men's uncanny ability to bounce back, particularly Flair, I'm convinced this would be one scenario capable of ruining them. It'd be more sensible to have a guy like Dallas Page team with Flair. That way the wrestler isn't hurt as the loss can be shrugged off as ring rust while still putting the football players over as tough guys. Another thing ridiculous about WCW is Hogan's no more jobs ultimatum. It's not like he's ever put anyone over clean anyway. He puts himself over more doing a job than Flair did in his tainted win. The invincible Hogan Uncensored had to make even the staunchest Hogan fan long to see Sting take over as the top star of the promotion. One criticism about the WWF and Shawn Michaels as champion. While I'm not a size freak and I realize he's close to the same size as Hart, he looks too small to be champion in an organization with monsters like Vader and Undertaker. He's got a good persona, but not a champion's aura the way Hart, Mr. Perfect or Randy Savage have. Jim Cornette is still the best interview in the sport and a great booker. As for ECW, it is entertaining and it is extreme, but it's too much like Nitro in that there are too many run-ins. The old saying, I go to a wrestling match to watch the crowd, definitely applies here. To me, Joey Styles is as obnoxious on the mic as Doak Hendricks, and it would be a better show with Paul E. doing the announcing. Goldust would be an awesome character in ECW. Jeff Birchfield. Johnson City, Tennessee. Peace Festival. I'm looking forward to the June 1st show, which should be an excellent card with great Sasuke, Chris Benoit, Jushin Liger, Psychosis, etc. on the show. Considering the price scale in Japan, $120 for front row is a bargain. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the more submission-oriented style gets over. The deluge of high spots in matches over the past 5 years is amazing. I hope what Ultimo Dragon is preaching doesn't fall on deaf ears. It would be nice if Inoki's Peace Festival silenced some of the WWF and WCW squabbles. Both companies need to focus on the talent dearth, saturation, and the forthcoming cable universe Big Bang. Of course, these issues will receive deficient attention. Kevin Donlin, Pasadena, Maryland. ECW have been commenting for years how commentators aren't selling wrestling moves. On April 28, WCW moved from negligent to criminal as Dusty Rhodes and Lee Marshall actually had an on-air conversation about how stupid it is to know what moved are called, and making fun of Tony Schiavone for his knowledge of the subject. Talk about clueless. Thanks to Prime Sports, I can finally watch ECW. While I like it and I can see why it has a following, for 2 years I've been hearing about the realism of the product compared to cartoon promotions. I have to ask the self-proclaimed hardcore fans, who's kidding who? ECW is a lot more violent, sure, but when wrestlers spend half an hour going through tables, chairs, steel rails, snack bars, get stiff crotch shots, etc. and keep coming back with negligible damage, that's cartoon wrestling to the nth degree. The style is different, but ECW remains about as real as watching the Bushwhackers. It's a good thing they cut out the blood. Never mind HIV. That arena looks so filthy, I'm shocked no blading wrestler has gotten a severe infection. Stephen Grant. Redmond, Washington. I was very disappointed with your comments in the March 18th newsletter, as were many of my friends who also subscribe, specifically lumping all New York wrestling fans together based on the actions of a few hundred alleged fans at an ECW show. I was angered further when the same type of fans at the March 15th show in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania didn't produce similar comments. You should know how knowledgeable and respectful wrestling fans are in this area, as you experienced it for yourself in January 1991, where about 10 inches of snow fell and thousands of fans braved the elements to witness Ric Flair beating Sting to win the title for the 6th time at the Meadowlands. If you attended the last show that WCW put together in this area at the Paramount 3 years ago, that would have been the most depressing night you ever spent watching pro wrestling. However, that won't stop me from attending the next WCW show, unless Hulk Hogan is on the card. Ifran Kirimka. Brooklyn, New York. DM, my comments weren't regarding wrestling fans in New York, just what appeared to be the majority of the fans who attended the March 8th EC. This is the end.